Please briefly summarize your industry education, professional background, and current role at InEight.
My current role at InEight is Chief Product Officer, so that's a role that I've been in going on 30 years now, really going back to the beginnings of one of the legacy companies that became part of InEight. So I've been on this journey for a few decades now, and been in construction really my whole life. I mean, literally from the time I was born, my family, most of my family's in construction, and grew up in heavy civil construction, and really got the bug for technology and the interest in technology. Like I said, about 30 years ago, that's kind of what took me down this path for that time. I've been involved in this journey that we now call InEight, focused on the construction technology side, specifically around project controls for construction.
So how does InEight fit within the infrastructure industry?
Well, InEight is, like I said, focused on project controls. We have an integrated project controls platform, and the goal of that platform is to provide really a data-driven approach for the various stakeholders that are involved in construction projects. So from the time that the project is conceived, typically by the owner-operator, doing early stage, budgets, schedules, defining scope. Our system comes into play at that stage, all the way through funding approval, project prioritization, and then ultimately into design, construction, startup and commissioning, closeout. So for the owner operators that are our customers, our software kind of starts and ends in the context of a project or a program. So they'll have obviously business objectives or organizational objectives that drive maintenance projects, new capital projects, and all of the stuff that goes into those in terms of planning them, working with contractors to execute them, making sure that everything's been delivered per spec. We've captured all of the as-built documentation and drawings and models and all that kind of stuff, leading into asset management. That's kind of where we hand off kind of at the end over to, let's say, an asset management system. So that's kind of from the owner operator's perspective. And then meanwhile, a big chunk of our customers are on the contractor side. So the contractors are using our tools, same tools, to collaborate with those owners, and manage their work, manage their schedules, manage their work packs, manage procurement, manage subcontractors, manage progress, manage budgets. So basically probably the best way to kind of boil it all down is either from the owner or contractor's perspective is it's about managing the three key aspects of project controls, which is scope, cost, and schedule. And typically we see historically you might have 20, 30 different systems, a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets, that are kind of being used to manage those three dimensions of that triad. And so we replace all of that chaos with one system that connects all the different business process, connects all the data, connects the workflows, and just brings a lot of order to the process.
How are the current deficiencies in water infrastructure different than problems in other forms of infrastructure? And how did it get this way?
There's probably more similarities than there are differences. In general, as I'm sure you know, in many parts of the world, particularly in the U.S., infrastructure in general is degrading. It's been underfunded. It's all over the news in the U.S. Relative to the passage of the new Infrastructure Investment Act, which is long overdue. But the infrastructure in general, particularly again in the U.S., if we focus just on that, is in need of additional funding, and part of the issue is the funding cycles and the approval cycles for particularly something like water infrastructure. Those cycles are very arduous, right? I mean, you have some triggers that are based on population growth, construction fees, so as housing, more housing comes into play, that's contributing oftentimes to funding for new water infrastructure, but it typically doesn't go far enough to deal with maintenance and upgrades and required regulatory changes to existing infrastructure and existing plants. So you see an industry that's sort of struggling just to keep up with growth, and oftentimes that prioritization shifts towards expansion to keep up with population growth, but it's not adequate to keep up with the maintenance, the upgrades of existing facilities to meet new requirements. So that's a big challenge. Is, how do we, much like the rest of the construction industry in general and infrastructure in particular, the challenge is how do we get more for our dollar, and how do we stretch the funds and use them, most effectively. With that sort of a funding shortage as a backdrop, it's critical that you work efficiently, you work productively to deliver these projects. You can't afford to have overruns. You can't afford to do rework, right? You can't. You really have to be on point from a productivity and efficiency perspective.
So how will technology shape and improve infrastructure in the near and long term?
Well, I think the tech does exactly that, right? It does help stretch those budgets further. So it allows organizations to get more capacity, let's say, out of those funding levels, and to deliver projects with more certainty. So that's I think another challenge in the industry that the technology like InEight can provide, and that's to capture data. So as you're going through projects, you capture data in a consistent way, and that becomes essentially a knowledge library, so that the next project, you're planning that with more realism, right? You're planning that in a more risk-adjusted way, because that the software can apply things like machine learning, look back at previous projects and data from those previous projects and surface, oh, here's some risks you may not have thought of. Here's some, or perhaps some opportunities, that you need to explore on this new project, right? And all of that kind of creates this virtuous cycle of, each project gets a little better and a little better. So every time you do a project, it's not, we're starting over on the next one. We're leveraging all of those lessons learned in that history. So, that's certainly one way I think the technology is helping deal with that kind of overall funding need to stretch that funding. I think the other big area where technology is certainly evolving is in the area of digital twins. So, the concept that everything is designed and engineered these days in 3D, and building information modeling and 3D models are being used in more and more extensively now. It's not just sort of to represent provide that visual context of the facility. It's enabled you to go through and connect data to that 3D model. So, for example, as you're in the commissioning stage or the quality stage of a project, you can tie all the activity that's going on. Hey, we got to start up this equipment. We got to test this equipment. Let's say it's a wastewater treatment plant. You can tie all that activity to those components in the 3D model, and not only get the visual context that way, but then also track what actually happened in the context of that model. So if you imagine 2 years later, 5 years later, anybody can bring up that 3D model, click on any kind of component in that 3D model and see, oh, when was that work delivered? Who did it? Who did the inspection? What's the warranty documentation on that, on that system, let's say, that's been installed? So it really, creates this digital record, that the owner operator can use for the whole life of the project. I think that's another big way that the tech is evolving pretty rapidly in the infrastructure space.
So how would you describe the infrastructure workforce? How is it changing, and how can these workforce changes and challenges be met?
In general, there is in construction, there's let's face it, there's a labor shortage, right? So the workforce is aging. The workforce is not attracting new people into the industry as rapidly as it needs to keep up. And because of that, because of the nature of it, many are record numbers are going into retirement. So having again, kind of going back to how does the technology help with that problem? Well, capturing that knowledge, capturing those lessons learned from projects. Basically, it's a knowledge transfer situation, right? So you've got the ability, as you're trying to scale the organization, bring new people into that workforce. They're not going to have 30 years of experience, right? So capturing all that experience from your experts, your experienced people in like I said, in a knowledge library is one way to help deal with that issue, right? You can help get new people up to speed faster. They can be smarter planners because they can take advantage of all the work, that came before them by more experienced people, and just work more efficiently, right? Where you're not having to dig for information to help you figure out how should we plan this particular aspect of this new project. You've got all that information at your fingertips. So I think that's and that's true of really just about every industry, right? Where you're seeing that need to do that knowledge transfer, that need to get new people on board faster, and that's just kind of a general advantage of technology. I think InEight's technology is no exception to that, right? We can really help with that challenge.
So what are your thoughts on the new infrastructure law? How much do you think it can help?
There's a good chunk of funding in there, 55 billion, I think it is, for specifically for water infrastructure. So that's certainly not anything to sneeze at. I mean, to a large degree, it's a continuation of with slight expansion of funding, mechanisms that were already in place. So it includes, some of the or increases some of the state, revolving loan programs, which is another nice mechanism to fund some, expansion and maintenance projects. So, the water infrastructure industry, I think, maybe has a bit of a PR problem, right? Because it doesn't seem to get the headlines that, let's say alternative energy gets, or even transportation, electric vehicles and things like that, and the power grid. Those things seem to dominate the headlines, sometimes for bad reasons, right, when they don't work. But water infrastructure, I think, is just one of those things that people tend to take for granted a bit. So it may not get the sexy speeches on the floor of Congress, to solve those challenges. But no, I mean, the new bill is great. I mean, it's no doubt going to help. And even sort of tying it back to technology, the new Infrastructure Investment Act includes specific grants in there for the use of technology, and frankly, InEight's quite excited about the fact that some of those technology grants are specifically around the kind of things that InEight does, relative to project management systems and project control systems. So that's probably the thing that we like the most about it, is that there is a recognition that, hey, we can work smarter as an industry and deliver projects with more certainty, stretch those budgets even further, just by continually, or I should say, accelerating the use of technology inside the industry.
So what should our engineering audience be thinking about in their work in terms of technology and its adoption? What do they need to know that they may not know already?
They probably know this already, but it may be one of those things where you see it sort of incrementally and not realize the massive shift happening. But that move to an all digital process, that people refer to as construction 4.0 or digital transformation, was underway. A few years ago. You could really see, like I said, I've been doing this for many years now, and you could definitely see that uptick happening starting a few years ago. Then the pandemic hit, and it just accelerated. For a little bit of time, maybe a couple months, everyone was worried that, maybe work is just going to dry up and nobody's going to feel like spending any money. But the reality is the opposite happened, right? It was construction was, generally treated as essential. It was often used as a way to keep the economy going or grow jobs, right? So funding for construction just continues to grow. But now you have this, all the issues that the pandemic brought along in terms of logistical challenges, restrictions on moving people from project to project, what those people can actually, what do they have to do when they get to the job site, for pandemic mitigation type stuff. And so, the industry recognizes the way technology can help with this, right? If we use an online system like InEight, where we can collaborate easily no matter where people are, we can make plans that deal with those risks inherent in the supply chain, that are coming about now. So we can plan our procurement better. We can have contingency plans in place, easily share out those plans as they change, right? So the uncertainty that's kind of come about, in the industry over the last couple of years, coupled with the, just the growing economies and increased funding, I think that's created kind of a perfect storm for this massive technology adoption, and we're seeing that. So I think from an engineer's perspective in the water infrastructure industry, I think you'll continue to see the expectation shift to, hey, we need to go from a siloed approach. Everybody's kind of doing their own things, maybe out in Excel spreadsheets, to a collaborative, all digital approach. And we've seen this already in other industries, right? Banking, healthcare, financial, automotive. They've already kind of gone through that shift. Construction is unique in that there are multiple stakeholders, and it's a very uncontrolled environment, right, where these projects are being delivered. So there's unique aspects due to the nature of construction, but that shift to an all digital approach, and it's fully underway, and like I said, accelerating, and partially again driven by the owners who want to continue to evolve the digital record for that asset. So it starts off in design. We've got a model now as we're going through construction in the original build of that facility. We're adding to that digital model with sort of as designed and as built data and documents and drawings and everything else that are right there inside the model now, and then using that model to do inspections, ongoing inspections, to do maintenance throughout the life of that asset. That's kind of becoming the expectation, right? That we have all that information at our fingertips in the form of a digital twin, and not information spread all over the place in a whole bunch of different systems that somebody's got to go dig for. So I think that's probably the big thing. Just if you're not conscious of that digital transformation and thinking about how how your organization is going to participate in that, you run the real risk of kind of being left behind. And like I said, the combination of strong economies and specific funding like the Infrastructure Investment Act is just accelerating that move and that push. The move to online systems is not to be understated. It used to be sophisticated systems like that, which InEight provides to manage this planning and execution of construction projects, used to be a pretty major effort to implement those kind of systems. So you'd have a lot of organizations who are like, hey, this sounds like a great idea, but we're too busy. We don't have the resources to to kind of stand up our own hardware and get things installed and get everything ready to go. Now all of this is delivered via the cloud. I mean, it's the time to get going on this kind of technology. I think some people might still perceive it as though it's a big effort, a big undertaking, and it's become quite the opposite. There's the vendors like InEight provides the technology. The organizations that want to take advantage of it, really all they have to do is log in. Certainly define what their business process is going to be, how they're going to use the tools, and InEight helps with that. But the overall effort and cost to get implemented with a system like this is a fraction of what it used to be, and that's fortunately that's helping that acceleration that I mentioned.